Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special business meeting of the District of Squamish for May 22nd. Halkan Squalum Quees Tiluptimat Squamish, Awayamayo. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There's an agenda in front of council. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. First up, we have a public hearing with regard to zoning bylaw 2000-2011, amendment bylaw CD zone 89, 38648 Buckley Avenue, number 2583, 2018. At the beginning of all public hearings, I read a statement as per the legislation. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to council respecting matters contained in the proposed District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2000-2011 amendment bylaw CD zone 89, 38648 Buckley Avenue, number 2583, 2018. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the planning department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of council or any persons addressing council. I now call on the planning department to introduce the bylaws.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Elaine Naseby and I'm a planner with Community Planning. This evening is the public hearing for 38648 Buckley Avenue. First and second readings were given on May 1st. And at that time, Council asked for additional information about rental housing demand and affordable rental rates. General Manager of Community Planning and Infrastructure, Gary Buxton, will provide clarification on these items. So to situate the parcel, it is the existing municipal skate park parcel in Denville, and so to the north is the recently developed Newport Landing townhomes. To the south is Howe Sound Secondary and two other schools. It's on Buckley Avenue. To the west is a church and a childcare facility, and to the west is undeveloped. So the parcel is 4 acres in size, and it's primarily undeveloped as green space. There are riparian areas, Wilson Slough to the southwest and Britannia Slough to the east. The drainage surrounding the site is heavily influenced by tides and drainage channels that connect Crescent Slough from the west to the Mampclown Blind Channel through Wilson Slough to the east. As mentioned, it's the existing skate park, and there is also an existing pump track on site. So the land is currently zoned Assembly, which is P2. Assembly provides municipal and government services and facilities which serve the entire district, such as fire hall, health center, and clinic hospital, municipal offices, schools, so that sort of a nature. The zoning surrounding the parcel to the north is the townhouse development. Much of Denville is zoned duplex. The Wilson Crescent area is zoned multifamily. The schools have the same zoning as this parcel, the Assembly P2. To the east is resource zoned land. So here I'll pass it over to Gary Buxton to speak to the need for rental housing.
So this is, excuse me, Gary Buxton, General Manager here at the district. So some of the information we've been able to tease out of the local market information and through some housing needs, high-level housing needs assessments that were done by consultants in the recent past. So 2016 to 17, we've seen apartment rents increasing, say those 2017 numbers, anything between 15 and 20%. Those continue to increase. The vacancy rate has been at 0 for quite some time. That hasn't changed. Our consultant indicates that from a very high level, there are about 1,700 units of rental backlog. That's units for folks that either don't have appropriate housing or are paying more than 30% of their income already in 30% of their income in rental each month. Looking over the next few years, there's likely another 500 to 600 units of new rental need to keep up with that. So there is a substantial undersupply backlog of affordable rental housing in the community. Those in core need, the deepest of the need, is anything between 1 and 400 units. So there is obviously a significant affordable rental housing need in the community. In terms of the background as to where we're focusing our actions, I mean, the Housing Task Force, the recommendations, the strategy on that was to focus on the affordable rental and modest market sectors using that CMHC metric of 30% of income for housing. So we are looking at the affordable rental and modest market. It's not deeply subsidised. We will be supporting the supply of other subsidising social housing by supporting other organisations such as Under One Roof as best we can, in that case with land, where the area median income's substantially less than 80%. So in terms of there are various ways of sort of describing the housing spectrum. We're looking at this portion in sort of the middle to the right-hand side of the spectrum, so purpose-built secondary suites and rented condominiums, affordable rental. That's where our direct district action is going to be. In terms of other projects that are in progress right now or just opened, Centrepoint is more of a subsidised rental. The Under One Roof project, which should be starting soon, performs the emergency shelter and supportive housing on the far left-hand side of the spectrum. And if the seniors project on 3rd Avenue gets going, that's in the subsidised and affordable rental, sort of that part of the spectrum. So this is, our project is sort of one of many that are sort of proposed and planned to address as many parts of the housing spectrum as we can. But I say we're focusing on that affordable market rental part of the spectrum. So we're targeting a median renter household income in that sort of affordable, what we call the affordable missing middle. 10%, we're targeting 10%, at least 10% below market rental rates. Area median incomes between 70 and 100% of area median incomes. Core needs housing could be accommodated in the project if there are portable income or rent subsidies that those clients can bring to the project. These are some of the other metrics that we're using to try and sort of plan this project. We want 20% of the units. And this is some work we're doing with BC Housing. We want 20% to be available to 30% below median income. And these are targets that we need to work towards in developing this project. And I say, as part of this, as we're involved in the development and construction, it's got to be sustainable, and the plan is that it's fully sustainable in the long run. It pays for itself. There's no ongoing operational subsidies or funding going into the project from the taxpayer.
So much of the rest of this presentation was given to Council at first and second reading, but I will give it again for the benefit of the public. So an overview of the rezoning is that this is district directed on a district-owned parcel, and that fact alone removes a large barrier to developing affordable housing, which is land cost. The rezoning would help enable a partnership between the District of Squamish and BC Housing in the provision of affordable housing in the community. We would retain the existing skate park. There would be a new neighborhood park at the northwest corner of the parcel, as well as potential community amenity space within the proposed apartment building. So as Gary mentioned, it would be affordable rental, and with this rezoning bylaw, we would bring in a definition of affordable housing into the zoning bylaw. So what is proposed is 80 units, 72 proposed in an apartment building, and 8 3-bedroom townhomes. So the apartment building would be maximum 5 stories. And so to break that down, there would be roughly 32 studio units, 24 1-bedroom, 16 2-bedroom, and 8 3-bedroom. And as Gary mentioned, the housing would not be subsidized, similar to Castle Rock. It would be low to moderate income rental housing. So the site location is very central. It's in proximity to schools, commercial downtown, employment, as well as recreation. There is a Metro Vancouver rental study that looks at a reduced parking for purpose-built rental. And so with those 80 units, this rezoning proposes 101 parking stalls. To put that into context, if this was being built downtown, 90 stalls would be required, but outside downtown, there's a greater parking requirement, so it would be 140 stalls. So the parking community space, as mentioned, the existing skate park would remain, which is a community-wide destination for skateboard enthusiasts. A new neighborhood park would be available to the public, and a community amenity activity center. This is a preliminary site plan, and so next steps following a rezoning, if it is successful, would be a development permit stage where this site plan would be looked at in closer detail. But here we have, you can see the riparian areas of Wilson Slough and Britannia Slough that remain untouched with 30-meter setbacks. The orange color, there's the apartment building to the south and the townhomes to the north. There is surface parking as well as that park on the northwest corner and the existing skate park. In terms of transportation and pedestrian bike access, the main access would be off of Buckley Avenue. There is not access currently off of Carson Place. In terms of active transportation, this parcel is adjacent to the Discovery Trail, which is a key off-road route that will likely have future upgrades. There is currently discussion with School District 48 for an off-road multi-use path on school property to the east of Buckley Avenue. There's a potential for a new pedestrian crosswalk in proximity to this parcel. That was also something that came out of a referral to BC Transit in terms of accessing bus stops. And it is designated as a safe route to school in this area. A traffic study was done for the nearby Jumar development. So Jumar will have 100 new residential units and 15,000 square feet of commercial space. That traffic study assumed a 2% annual growth after the Jumar is developed. And it did look at Buckley Avenue and Britannia Avenue intersection. So it did find that turning from Britannia onto Buckley during the AM peak hour projected to be a level of service at D or E by the year 2029, and that does mean that it would be approaching capacity by that time. The addition of Jumar as well as this proposed rezoning may not have a large impact on the Britannia Avenue intersection specifically, as those two developments are likely to be turning south during that peak morning hour. In terms of infrastructure, it is in a conditional densification and secondary floodway for flood hazard. So flood modeling and flood report would be required early in a subsequent design stage. The floodplain management bylaw applies, and the community activity space would require an exemption. Servicing, so water, fire flow, and sewer capacity would be further examined also with modeling, and if off-site upgrades are required, they would be a cost to the project. So for public consultation, in addition to typical means of providing development application information to residents, such as the development showcase on the district's website, an additional project webpage was created for affordable housing in general and specific to the initiative on this specific parcel. It includes preliminary site plan and frequently asked questions. A public information meeting was held in Squamish Elementary School on March the 8th. And for that, notification was mailed to all of the Dentville and Wilson Crescent neighborhood. There were 5 staff persons there to discuss the proposal, and there was about 35 residents in attendance. We did receive 9 handwritten feedback forms at that evening. Subsequent to that, we've received around 12 email comments, and tonight we're having the public hearing. So the public comments that we've heard, so there is recognition in general that there's a need for affordable housing in the community and for rental housing. There is support for improving the existing youth center, and there was a comment supporting activating what can be seen at times as an unsafe space. Concerns from the neighborhood, the primary concern we heard was for neighborhood traffic, for that pedestrian safe route to school, the proposed building height and density, parking, a concern that parking might spill out into the surrounding neighborhood, a concern about the loss of green space, loss of the pump track on the parcel, questions whether the park size is sufficient, and concern about potential skate park noise conflict. In terms of budget, so BC Housing may fund the capital costs for this, and the district may choose to waive DC or development processing fees. The neighborhood park is currently in the district's 2018 budget for a value of $150,000, and that does include a contribution from Newport Landing, the adjacent townhome development, and that is in the range, I believe, of $60,000. And active transportation improvements are needed in the area. Sorry. And so if this does go ahead through the district's active transportation fund as well as road upgrades, this area would be seen as a high priority. In terms of policy, for the current and the draft 2040 official community plan, this proposal, this rezoning does align with policy related to residential infill, affordable housing, workforce housing, and purpose-built rentals. It also meets policy related to recreation access and amenities, and it does not fully align with natural areas network, environmentally sensitive areas, and eco assets. The 2012 Parks and Recreation Master Plan recommended the creation of neighborhood park space in Dentville. So next steps. So as mentioned, if this rezoning is approved, flood as well as infrastructure studies would be required. Additional consultation could be done. Development permit, so we would look at site efficiencies through design, so trying to maximize that park space and see whether there's any efficiencies with the design. Also, there will be further environmental review, so typically at a development permit stage, there is a site bioinventory and further riparian area setback review. And following that, as typical, site alteration permit, building permit, and servicing agreement. For tonight's public hearing, in terms of legislative notice, requirements have been met. So notice was posted in 2 consecutive issues of the Chief, May 10th and May 17th. Notification was hand-delivered to owners and tenants within the required 100-meter radius of the site, and then above and beyond that to the entire Dentville and Wilson Crescent neighborhood on May 11th. The staff recommendation tonight is information for council prior to the public hearing and subject to the public hearing that the bylaw receive 3rd reading. Thank you.
Council, any questions for staff at this point? I have a, Councillor Parr, go ahead.
Can you just clarify the zoning that it is now?
The zone currently is Assembly District P2.
It's for anybody in the public that might not understand that zoning. So assembly owned by the district, lands owned by the district.
Right, so although it is an undeveloped open space, it's actually not zoned our P3 zone that usually is what parks are zoned. It's zoned P2, which is Assembly District, which is basically for municipal buildings and services.
Well, thank you. And could you just swing back to the map or the site plan, please? Yeah, right there. So the park is right at the entrance going in, Buckley. But now, to get to the skateboard park, you have to park in that parking lot. You can't drive through.
You can park on Carson Place and walk in, or you can drive through.
No, it doesn't show driving through though, it's all parking.
If I may add, this is a conceptual site plan, so it was developed to make the application for funding and just kind of determine the potential densities on site. But with this development, if the bylaws were to be adopted, we would look for parking efficiencies as well as connecting to the existing skate park. So we were really interested in finding out whether we could grow the park area, and maybe some of that parking that's currently shown up there could be done on the side of the road. So just want to highlight that it's conceptual at this point. This is not the final product.
Well, so to the letters that we've got, potentially the building that's closest to the townhomes there might not be exactly right there. It might be somewhere else, right? That's good. Thank you.
Just for clarity, the proposed park is a separate project. It'll go ahead regardless of the rezoning, correct?
That's correct, yes.
And I'm wondering if you know, when was that zone P2? Was that when the skate park went in, or was the zoning predate that?
It's, we don't know the answer to that. We haven't looked at it, but it appears that it might have been zoned when the school sites were zoned, because it's the same zoning on the two schools that are there as this site. I'm not sure.
Okay. Councilor Kent?
Two questions. At the bottom, down where the skate park is, the access from Carson Road, I know there's a piece of crown land in there, a small wedge kind of thing. And does it impinge on the ability to make an access road through there?
On the south end?
Yeah, on the south end, yeah.
There's a slew.
Mayor Hensman, through you, this aerial photo shows that crown parcel to the south, and currently we can't provide access through there because it's a crown parcel.
We could acquire it, or we could acquire about it, acquire it. The other question, infrastructure-wise, is our infrastructure out on Buckley or where we would tie in this project able to support something of that size?
I'll invite Dave Merrow to the table. He's with engineering.
Good evening. Through the mayor, yes. So the water and sanitary services within Buckley Avenue are sufficient to service the site. The existing water main that goes into the skate park area and the youth center is deficient for fire flows, so it would have to be upgraded back to and tie into Buckley Avenue.
Is it insufficient today or insufficient with the new use?
With the new use.
Council, any other questions for clarification? Don't see any. I'll now call on the public who persons affected that will be given an opportunity to speak. After I've confirmed it is your turn, please approach the podium, commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization. And just note that you'll be given 5 minutes to speak, although if you want to continue to come up, we will make sure we're here to listen to all the comments. I have 2 people on the speakers list so far. First up is Eric Armour, and on deck is Sarah Weber.
Hi guys. Sorry, I'm a little nervous, but
That's okay.
yeah, I just.
Can you just state your name and your address,
sorry.
and if you represent yourself,
Thanks,
a
Patty.
business or an organization?
Yeah, Eric Armour, 38832 Newport Road. And I just wanted to make a couple comments. I don't support the project in its current manner. Mainly, I find it odd that the district is getting into the development game with being able to offer a product at 10% below market value. It's not necessarily affordable, it's more mainstream. There is a need for low-income housing. I don't think this is the answer. So fundamentally, I think it's flawed in that sense. Also, it is, it is green space, it is, RS2, it does, it will need a rezoning that goes, I think, again, it doesn't go with the current OCP that's just been recently adopted. I might be wrong on that, but I'm sure if I go for it. So there's that. So it's not affordable, it's mainstream. Low-income housing is definitely needed. Sorry, I'm starting to ramble a little bit, but it just seems like it is an election year, and it just seems like a bit of an election thing. And I just don't think it's necessarily a good fit. Traffic is also a really big issue with it as well. That is already a very awkward corner with the building of the Newport Landing development. You already have vehicles going off that merge lane between 30 kilometers an hour blindly into kids that are on a quote-unquote safe route to school. So there's a major problem there. And I did read the report. A lot of the stuff, well, a portion of it did mention benefits for businesses as well, and staff housing and all that kind of stuff. I can speak to that personally. I am a business owner in town. I employ 15 people in that bracket. There was a bit of a panic maybe about a year ago when prices started really going crazy, but that's definitely stabilized for the business community now. Turnover is low. People have figured it out. People have adjusted. So I don't think a staffing / business case is necessarily there. And then there's lots of stuff coming online as far as apartments and all that kind of stuff goes. So affordable housing, I think, for something that looks like it's going to be a mainstream project for 10% below market value, it doesn't really look like much at the moment. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Weber, and that's the end of my list. If you do want to speak at the public hearing, just go out into the lobby and put your name down with staff. If that dries up, I'll make sure if you put your hand up, I'll recognize you. Please state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business and an organization, and don't touch the mic. Thanks.
Okay, I'm Sarah Weaver, 38731 Britannia Avenue. And yes, I was not aware that it was only 10% below market value. I had some questions about that, like to what extent it is addressing the low income need. Yeah, my initial reaction, I guess, thoughts, some of which I submitted in the letter as well. I mean, I've lived nearby for many years and have spent a lot of time walking through that particular parcel of forest, and I would be really sad to see all the, get lost, or I recognize the need for housing, but it really does have ecological value. There's a lot of birds and critters and big trees there. So I would say, yeah, if it's decided that this is absolutely a necessity, that there's no other options for council to support low-income housing, that really there should be offsets or compensations for other areas of Squamish that are not going to have green space removed, because it already is kind of serving as a park. So for example, that area between Dentville and the highway, which you can see, environmentally sensitive area, should be conserved in perpetuity, all that whole stretch, and the forest north of Dentville, between Dentville and the industrial park, that should be kept in perpetuity. These are sort of what keeps our neighborhood in a little pocket of fresh air and somewhat niceness. And this big chunk, if it's taken away, that would really impact it. Other thoughts? Yeah, 5 stories is way too high. 3 stories, similar to the Newport Landing, would be the absolute maximum. That should go in anywhere in that whole area. It's just too imposing. We don't want to live in like a sea of towers. It just doesn't really fit with the neighborhood. And that density would really affect the traffic, which, yeah, as Eric pointed out, it's really already an issue. I see kids, like streams of kids, children wobbling on bicycles and, you know, little ones like that go along that stretch of Buckley like every day back and forth. So that's a huge consideration. What were my other things? I just wanted to ask the council as well what other affordable housing options you've looked at. Like if there are options to purchase existing units. I'm sure there's a cost issue, yeah, could you purchase some existing units and put those in an affordable housing pool, or with future developers have a percentage of the units, you know, a requirement that a percentage of them get put towards affordable housing, and that is very strictly enforced, and that such housing really is targeted to people who really need it. Let's see. I think I had some other points, but mostly, yeah, stormwater management would be an issue if you're taking out a huge swath of green. That like stormwater infiltration capacity would need to be considered, and definitely, yeah, there needs to be buffers all around that whole area in terms of trees maintained. Yeah, I'm like support the idea of affordable housing. I don't want to see 5 stories. I don't like the idea of loss of green space, and traffic is an issue, and yeah, from what my neighbor here says, it sounds like it's maybe not enough of a drop from market pricing as would ideally be the case.
Thank you very much. That's all that I had on my list. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Just put your hand up, unless staff in the hall have a list going. I don't see any hands, but perhaps we can. Why don't I have some questions answered, and I'll come back to Eric. Yeah. So there was a question about the OCP, and maybe just the OCP current designation is residential. The new OCP has not yet been adopted. So the current OCP designation is residential, correct?
Yes.
Wondering if you could just speak to the riparian area buffer as well, and sort of the percentage of the land that is actually under development consideration.
So the one useful thing about the site plan is that it does have the riparian setbacks in it. And so as you can see, the area here, which is the location of where the currently is a pump track, is a riparian area. So we've done a preliminary analysis essentially on site to determine what is developable and what is not. And so there's a riparian setback along this property line and a riparian setback along here. We'll have to do more studies when, if the bylaw proceeds forward. But it certainly looks like we'll be able to achieve protection of the riparian areas as well as establish a developable site there.
Well, there was some questions about the affordability of these units, and we're just deciding land use today, so there's been no decisions. I think council would agree there's still lots of work to be done on exactly where the price point from these fall. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear, that this is not approving the development necessarily, although some preliminary work has been done. We're deciding a land use in this particular bylaw.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
That's correct, yeah. I say we're 10% below is where we start. We've had some preliminary conversations with BC Housing. They'd like to drive that at least to 20%, perhaps 30% for some of the units. We won't know what we can do with respect to rents until we have a preliminary construction budget, which is we're months away from having that. At that point in time, we make a decision, BC Housing will make a decision as to whether or not to provide any more funding for the project. If it can't drive rents low enough for their satisfaction and our satisfaction, this thing stops.
Thank you. Questions?
On BC Housing's contribution, I know that's one of the reasons that it's been of interest to council, is because BC Housing is going to kick in. Can you say an amount there? Do they have an amount yet?
So I think the point of this is it's a land use decision in front of council.
He brought it up.
No, but he brought it up in response to that it's a land use decision in front of us. The actual, what gets built is yet to be determined, and the funding for it is yet to be determined. This is a land use decision in front of council.
But I'm just trying to point out why it's an interesting land use decision for council. For me, myself, it's because there's a contribution from housing, BC Housing, which makes it, like Gary said, could be 30%, not just 10. I mean, we aim for the best we can, so part of the decision is because of the contribution from BC Housing. So if you don't want to
We need to focus in on questions.
I'm
We're
done.
not getting into the debates of it yet. Clarification questions and information that, question?
Yeah.
Question?
On the number of stories, you said 5 stories, why not 4 stories?
Because there are constraints, such as riparian areas, and we'd like to maximize the park space on site, and then you have to consider things like parking. So 5 stories is not unreasonable in this area. It's close to downtown, it's almost downtown. It's next to the school site. The height of the building is probably not going to be any higher than the current vegetation, the height of the trees on site. So I think it will be, I think the impact will be lesser than some folks might think.
So bigger park and more parking.
To make sure that we fit enough parking, make the park space bigger, and as well as protect the riparian areas.
And just for clarification, it's 4 stories of residential, and the bottom floor is no residential because of the floodplain.
That's right.
Correct.
Councillor Blackman, what?
Yeah, I'm wondering if staff could elaborate a little bit more on 2 things. Number 1, the timeline and the genesis of this project and where it came from. It's my understanding that it's something that goes back a few years now. And then also talk a little bit about how this site was selected in comparison with other potential sites.
Well, my understanding is probably the best part of 18 months ago, we had some preliminary conversations with BC Housing, and they expressed an interest in supporting the project in the district. So we went looking for land that we have clear title, fee simple. We didn't come up with a lot of options. So in terms of questions about what alternatives have we considered, we came up with this site and one other site that was readily developable in the short term. Turns out the other one in Valley Cliff turned out to be far from developable because of various environmental and riparian setbacks. So this really was one of the few sites that we have as a district that is readily developable. The other options that we are considering is asking developers to provide a certain percentage of units. A few of those are approved already or going through the zoning process. So land options are fairly limited in the district without purchasing land, but you can't build affordable housing on land you purchase at market rates. It just doesn't work. There are a few options with respect to land, and we do have some other irons in the fire with respect to getting units from developers.
We did also consider a number of crown land parcels, but there's a much longer process to acquire those lands.
Yeah.
So they were part of the deliberation as well. But it did also come out of the recommendations from the Affordable Housing Task Force that was set up 3.5 years ago.
Yes, that was recommendation number 1, I believe.
Councillor Kent.
Vis-à-vis the land use decision, should this site be used for this purpose we're discussing tonight? I know Jumar commissioned a traffic study at the Cleveland area, but would there be another one done in conjunction with this? Because of the density we have now in Dentville and at Wilson Place is increasing.
You probably wouldn't commission a traffic study in the same way that Jamar did, because of the information from Jamar is readily transferable to this in terms of traffic movements. What we do need to do is do some work on that intersection at Britannia, Buckley and Carson. This is actually unnamed, it's not Carson Place. So there are some active transportation improvements we need to do. We will need to do as part of this. We have active transportation budgets in 2019 and 2020, road rehab budgets in 2019 and 2020 that we can look at when we know what those improvements may be. This will not open until 2020, if at the earliest.
Eric, did you have your hand up? Yeah, come on up.
I did have one more question / comment, and it is a little off base because I know you are talking about a land use decision, but it was more to just shed a little bit more light on the development issue and all that kind of stuff. Now, over on McNamee Place and whatnot, you have Strathmore Lodge and a whole bunch of affordable income apartment buildings. One just recently gone up for sale. That sells, and God forbid it gets bulldozed. Where do those people go? How are they absorbed into the community? And 80 proposed units at just below market value, or 16 units at 30% below market value, because I think that was what the ratio worked out to, wouldn't be able to absorb that. So like I say, it's a slippery slope with the district getting into the whole development game. And I'm not sure having a centralized approach in one building is necessarily the best strategy. If it was a portion of all these new developments going up, whether it's 80 units over 20 developments or whatever the heck it may be down the road, it might be a better thing just throwing ideas out there at the same time as I want to just be a complainer type. So, just wanted to say that.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Sarah?
Yes, a question. So that's great if there's some support from BC Housing. I wonder, would BC Housing also support the district purchasing existing units, or supporting purchasing units?
We are working with them on a variety of fronts in that regard as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, come on up, state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
My name's Daryl Simmons. I live at 1188 Wilson Crescent. I represent myself. I guess I'm just thinking about the rezoning of the land. In general, I guess personally a bit disappointed just with the amount of development that's happening. So my question would be, if this gets rezoned and this project, which personally I hope doesn't happen, if it falls through, what are the chances that once the land's rezoned, it'll then be sold to somebody else or some other larger development might happen?
Yeah, all staff speaks directly to them.
The rezoning is specific to affordable housing, so it would be non-market housing, and the district is entering into a partnership with BC Housing, where the district comes with the land, and BC Housing comes with some money. So that partnership wouldn't be unlikely to happen if the district for some reason sold the lands. But for in either case, it's going to be zoned for specific density and specific type of housing. So that's all that can happen now.
In theory, any future council could sell any piece of district land, in theory.
So, okay, but anyway, basically in terms of if it gets rezoned, it's just rezoned and that's how it's gonna be for,
Until it gets rezoned again, if it gets rezoned again. But this is a CG zone, so it's very specific to a very specific use. It's not just a general residential zone. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at the public hearing? I'll just see, were there any other questions that were asked that might need clarification? Councillor Elliott?
I just want to check something, because when I read the report, I read two different things. So one is that we're targeting median renter household income, which is somewhere in the range of 75,000. But then I've also heard you say we're going to try and push the rates lower, or BC Housing would. And then there's another statement in here that potentially people with much lower incomes could afford to live here through rental assistance programs, but that cap on income is at $40,000 right now, as of, well, even as of September this year, it'll go up to 40,000. So are we looking at, like, we can look at median income, but is that where the need is greatest? Because when I looked at your spectrum there, 75,000 is actually way over to the right. But there's a whole bunch of people in our community, including the folks that work for a lot of our not-for-profit agencies, that don't make that. But they also need places to live. So I'm wondering, are we making a decision about this kind of housing based on median income, a number, or need and demand in the community?
Both. Through the chair, the answer is both. The need is there. That part of the need that we're trying to address is the 70 to 100% of area median income. Now, you can measure median income in a number of ways, and we had this interesting conversation today. If you look at the individual, just the median income for the individual across the district, it's $40,000. If you look at median income for those that are full-time employed, it's $54,000. If you look at household median income, it's $88,000. You would probably target the one-bedroom, the bachelor and the one-bedrooms at the individual median income, and twos and threes at household and the average median income. So there isn't a median income. You wouldn't use the average median income for the family for a bachelor suite. You would use the individual or that employment base. So it gets a little...
So it's based on the size of the unit?
Yes.
And what's in the bylaw is a specific definition of affordable housing that doesn't get to the prescriptive level that you're talking about. So I think that's sort of the next conversation, should this move forward, is exactly what the target is and how we get there.
Yes. We will need to, as part of getting the funding from BC Housing for construction, we will need to have those numbers ironed out through a housing agreement and/or an agreement, tri-party agreement with an operator. So those issues will be resolved at that point.
Maybe I'll just read out the definition of affordable housing in the bylaw, because that's technically what we're approving today. Affordable housing means non-market and core needs housing available at rental rates and purchase prices below market rates and prices to those of low and moderate incomes, that is subject to a housing agreement between the district and a landowner pursuant to the Local Government Act, that has some form of occupancy restrictions and or the rent or price charged to the occupant for the unit, and as more clearly detailed in an affordable housing policy or bylaw approved by council. So there's a piece of this that has yet to be clearly defined in terms of the actual specific target. Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, I was just wanting to kind of just let everybody know that, like, this is a process, and we've got a ways to go on this. We haven't really figured out the numbers yet, and if the
We're
numbers...
in the public hearing still, Councillor Pryor.
Yeah, okay, well, the question is, how much longer, can you describe to me how much longer the process is going to be, and what information do we still have to gather?
What information do we gather? How many needs assessment, floodway, riparian, geotechnical?
On the financial end of it?
Yes, a preliminary construction budget within those previously housing, but then releases more funding to complete the design, which gets us to a decision on whether or not they provide construction financing,
Yeah.
at which point we'll be starting to lock down rental rates, incomes, those sorts of things.
And it also has something to do with, right now BC Housing has money that the federal government and provincial government are pushing to try and build housing like this in communities, is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you.
I will go out to the public again. Is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'm going to ask 3 times. So for a second time, is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? And I'll ask for a 3rd time, is there anyone who would like to speak at this public hearing? There being no further speakers, I will now close the public hearing and just remind council and the public that between public hearing and 3rd reading, council can't receive any more submissions, either written or verbal, and council can, in this meeting, vote on or consider voting on 3rd reading. Thank you very much, everybody. What I might do, just because I'm sure there's people in the audience who are interested, is council's leave. We'll move consideration of 3rd reading ahead of the other 2nd reading bylaw consideration. Councillor Black-and-Wolf, are you moving 3rd reading? Is there a second or seconded by Councillor Elliott? Councillor Black-and-Wolf, do you want to speak to it?
Yeah, so I think that so far the concept that's been presented is supportable from a land use perspective, and there's a few reasons for that. Number one, the way the concept lays out the site area plan, I think it is respectful of the existing neighborhood, also respectful of all of the riparian areas that are in this area. And it also is in an area where active transportation and alternatives to car transportation are very much a reality. And I think that the type of parking requirements that are being contemplated, I think they're realistic. We do have some experience of this already in the district. So for example, the Riverstones project in the North Yards, I suspect that the parking requirements that were put in that project are substantially lower than what is being contemplated here. And it's my understanding that generally there are no parking issues in that particular complex. So I think that here, given that proximity to downtown, that it is a reasonable approach. And I do think that this is, we did definitely consider a multitude of sites that the district owns. And this was the best one out of all the sites that were available. So for those reasons, I think it is a good idea to move forward with 3rd reading. And I'll just put in a comment as well that it's my expectation and what I intend to explore with my colleagues is definitely an adjustment on the rents. My goal as an individual councillor would be that the rents in this area, particularly for studios and 1-bedrooms, would be affordable for somebody who's working full-time at sort of service level, service industry wages, $15 an hour, that kind of thing. And I think we've got a bit more work to do to actually make that happen, but that is definitely a need in the community. you know, I think this will help close the gap that the market just isn't meeting right now. So I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. I'm going to go around the room, Councillor.
Thank you. So I'm going to support this motion. I think this is a good place for this type of a project. This is a land use decision. I think you've heard that we have a lot of the detail to still work out, costing, how much BC Housing is putting in, rent levels and so forth. But when you look solely at the issue here, is this a good place for people to live? I think the answer is yes. It is walkable to the downtown area, to a significant part of the business community. It is close to public transit, close to other services, and so has that advantage, which makes it more affordable. People don't necessarily need a car to live in one of these units. I take the point from the surrounding community and some of the neighbors who have spoken, and I think because of the riparian areas, actually, it means it has to be buffered almost, and I think a significant part of the vegetation will stay there on site. Staff did point out, I mean, the reason you go to higher heights is so you have a smaller footprint. And so it tends actually, in other places in the community, we've gone through this, and it tends actually to have less of a view block and surprisingly even less of a visual impact. I guess almost any development anywhere has an impact on people who are around it, but I think the impact in this case will be relatively minor. I take the point that it will add to the traffic. There are some weird intersections in that area that some of them might require some improvement. This may be the trigger to force that to happen. But all in all, I think this will be a good place for this, and I will be supporting it.
Councillor Kent.
I support the land use decision. As Councillor Ray said so eloquently, there's a lot of work still to be done on this, a lot of work. And as Mr. Buxton pointed out, unless we come to an equitable solution with BC Housing, it's not a go in any case. So we still have a lot of work to do to get there.
Councillor Elliott.
I'm going to support third reading. I think that we've been trying to address the housing spectrum from the beginning of our term. And so I know there was a comment that this seems like an election ploy, but actually housing is going to be an election issue in every municipality. I would say in the Lower Mainland, but likely across the province. People are really feeling the pinch. But this has been part of an effort by council this whole term, is to figure out how we address housing in each aspect of our housing continuum, right from core housing all the way up to affordable market rental. And we are putting pressure on developers to include it in their developments, but the demand is so high, we can't just rely on that. I think this is an eminently walkable neighborhood. I think that this council is going to pay really close attention to the rates, the rental rates that get put on this development as the details come forward, to make sure that we are actually addressing a need and not just a number. So I think it's supportable at this stage, for sure.
Councillor Pryor.
Well, I was hoping I'd get to go first so I could have some influence, but I'm in no hurry to go to third reading at this point. Councillor Chappelle's not here, and she's a passionate person about this particular one. I think we've got a ways to go. I do support, and I have supported the development in that area, but when staff tell me that the site plan is just laying out numbers, I would like to see a real site plan, and so I'd like to see a little bit of work put into that to maybe move those buildings around a little bit and make it nicer for the rest of the neighborhood. I mean, it's close to the shopping, and it's close to schools, close to transportation. I think the location is great, but I don't know what the panic is to go to third reading at this point, so
No
I'll go against it.
Thanks, Council. This is something we've been working on on a whole-scale level, affordable housing for 3+ years now. I actually get a little offended when someone calls this an election ploy, because from my point of view, I wish we'd done this a year ago, I wish we'd done this 2 years ago. Staff very clearly articulated the need. We've done that assessment, 1,700. We could have 1,700 rental units built today that would only meet today's need. By 2021, it's going to be an additional 600 rental units needed in our market to help keep affordability for the service class employee in Squamish. It's a critical need in our community. It's also a fundamental part of the housing continuum, because unless you're, and it was interesting, I sent an article out to staff the other day about the CBC interviewed 3 planners from the City of Vancouver from the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, 3 chief planners, and they were reflecting on today's housing crisis and what they would have done differently in the past to help alleviate the housing crisis that we have today. And all of them said, we did great with high-end housing, and the high-end housing paid for the subsidized housing, but we didn't pay attention to the middle-income housing. And that's where the strife is today. That's where people cannot afford to live in communities like Squamish. So for me, getting purpose-built rental on there that is secured in perpetuity and something we can actually count on getting built, as opposed to requiring units in a development application, that's part of the solution for sure. But there are no guarantees that a developer will build something tomorrow or the next day. If the market gets flooded, they simply won't build until there's a need to build. And so there's no guarantees that through development we're going to get those purpose-built rental pieces. It's part of it, because we certainly can't deliver 1,700 units plus 583 units ourselves. This, I think, will be the first of hopefully a number of purpose-built rental projects we do in partnership with BC Housing, ideally on Crown land, perhaps in partnership with Squamish Nation, perhaps in partnership with other nonprofits and other developers in the community, because this is a need that will not go away. This is sort of the second cycle of affordability that I've been through on council. In the first one, we started to do a whole bunch of policy, the market sort of tempered off a little bit, and we abandoned all the policy. We just let it sit there. And had we actually acted on that then, when markets started to flatten a bit, we would be in a better place today. So for us to pull our foot off the accelerator in terms of getting this type of housing built, just because markets seem to be flattening out, and I'm not so sure they are quite yet, but it's trending in that direction, is all the more reason why we need to move forward with these types of housing projects. As you can hear, I'm fully supportive of this project. I do think we have a lot of work to do with regard to targeting that affordable. I don't think we're affordable yet. I think all of council agrees, and certainly that's not what we're approving today. We need to work with BC Housing. We need to tap into some federal funding to help bring that mortgage cost down, so we can actually have units that are affordable to that real need in the community and in the service sector employee. I think the actual site design, as Councillor Pryor talked about, that we deal with those at development permit stage. This rezoning applications are just to give you a concept of what it is. We'll be fine-tuning all those things through a variety of other processes. So that's actually not the intention of a rezoning application that's in front of council today. I'm glad to see the skate park, which is a great community amenity. It's going to stay and actually get a new youth center, which I think is critically important. The building there now is long past its best due date, and we want to make sure our youth center is safe and available in perpetuity into the future. So I think that's really important. And I think a number of residents in the area pointed out the critical need for active transportation and better road infrastructure. And I think this development will actually help percolate some of those needs in that neighborhood to the top of our priority list. And some of them are already on our capital plans. So I will be supporting third reading. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Pryor is opposed. Motion carries. Thank you very much, everyone. I am going to suggest to council that we defer the RFP award for the project management services. I think we have some dialogue to go around that one. So just to let everyone know that we'll defer that to probably a community development committee meeting or something like that. Next up is District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2011 amendment bylaw 37781 Cleveland Avenue number 2565 2017.
Yeah, I'm in conflict on that one.
You have to make a, you can't just tell me, make a declarative statement.
I'm in conflict because I sold the property to the property owners.
Thank you. Anytime you're ready.
Perfect. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Carrie Hampton. I'm here at the District of Squamish, presenting to you tonight second reading for rezoning amendment bylaw 2565, 2017. The subject property is located at 37781 Cleveland Avenue in the southern part of downtown Squamish. At present, the parcel is zoned I3 General Industrial and is surrounded by industrial zoning. The rezoning proposes to rezone the parcel from I3 to Creative Mixed Use District 2, which is MUD 2, and to increase the zone's lot coverage from 55% to 60% to accommodate viable developments on small lots. So the rezoning will permit a 2-building mixed-use development incorporating 5 residential apartment units, roughly as you see here in yellow, and 270 meters squared of commercial space, here in blue. 1 unit will be dedicated rental unit as per the MUD 2 zone. The proposal also includes a unique ground floor through block walkway and an internal courtyard to provide pedestrian permeability through the site, as you can see identified by the red arrows. The preliminary design includes all required 5 residential parking stalls and 1 required commercial parking stall to allow for the maximum of 5 cash-in commercial stalls. An on-street front loading bay is proposed off Cleveland, and there are no variants proposed for this development at this time. The applicant is offering to provide a voluntary community amenity contribution of $43,380, an addition of $9,330 from their first proposal at first reading, which was $34,050. So $34,704 will be placed in the fund of accountant's choosing, where the remaining $8,676 will be divided as per the policy into Park Amenities Fund and the Active Transportation Amenities Fund. The funds are no longer specific to Cleveland Avenue frontage upgrades, as was proposed in the first reading. So with respect to the CAC targets at the time of application and the direction the CAC policy is evolving to today, the applicant has offered a blended offer, maintaining the 6 square foot interim CAC policy contribution and adding the $1.50 square foot for park and active transportation from the new CAC policy. A breakdown of these numbers and the CAC policy comparisons for further review can be found in attachment 1 and briefly summarized in the table on this slide. Staff believes that due to the timing of the application, which was in October of 2017, the same time when the new policy was first being reviewed by council, and the scale of the proposal itself with 5 residential units, this revised CAC offer is worthy of consideration for second reading. So to further clarify, the basic Cleveland Avenue upgrades will still be required as part of the servicing agreement and written into the land development agreement attached to this rezoning. They will include updates to accommodate emergency vehicle access and vehicle access to existing properties, as well as pedestrian access to the site. Upgrades are estimated at close to $100,000 and will be subject to latecomers agreement. So the project was posted to the district's development showcase in December of 2017. 1 comment was received after first reading, and a public information meeting was held on April 30th with 4 members of the public present. Post the public information meeting, 3 members of the public called or spoke with planning staff over the counter about the application. At this time, staff were informed that the notifications were sent 7 days prior to the event, not the 10 days as per our district public information policy, but staff are recommending to proceed with the to proceed with the consideration of the application, as this was a relatively minor discrepancy and should not warrant an additional public information meeting. All three members of the public spoke with staff and were given an opportunity to provide written comment. Public notification procedures will be undertaken should council confirm the public hearing. So staff are recommending that council approve the following resolutions to give second reading to amendment bylaw 2565 2017 and to schedule a public hearing date for June 19th, 2018 at 6 p.m.
Council, any questions? Councillor Blackmore.
I'm wondering if staff, I mean, would it be fair to say that the benchmark price that is being obtained in the market as today is substantially higher or significantly higher than it may have been in October 2017?
It's higher. We can't comment on how much higher, but yes, it's likely to be higher.
Yes or no?
I would say it's, yeah, it might be lower in the future. You never know. Questions, council? Councillor Riz?
Thank you. And I think I raised this at first reading, and we had a discussion around CACs being applied to frontage improvements, and I take it from the report and staff's comments that that's not the case now. And my concern actually, and I don't want to put this on the proponent, is more a question of what are we improving Cleveland Avenue to? Are we including it to a bike path or a 4-lane road, which it is now, because obviously there's a difference. And I'm just actually not sure as a council we put our minds to what the future of Cleveland Avenue is. I know there's been discussions in the past about access to oceanfront and so forth, but I'm just wondering if staff has any comments to that.
So through you, Mayor, as part of collecting funds for the active transportation plan or towards parks, we are accumulating those funds, and through our existing funds that we have annually for active transportation, we could, once we've accumulated enough funds and realize that this is a priority project, that project would come forward to council for your opinions and thoughts around how that road design would look. So at this time, what we're just trying to achieve with this application is just ensure safety and access to the site. So allowing emergency vehicle access and allowing pedestrian access to the site. So the overall design of that actual piece can definitely come to council at a later date.
So I'm not sure that answers your question though. As a part of any development application, they would be responsible for doing frontage to the middle of the road, correct?
Yes, correct.
So if we don't know the road design of that road, how are they building the frontage to the middle of the road?
It's been discussed with engineering staff that asking for a full frontage upgrade as per subdivision development control bylaw may not be necessary on the specific site. And so it was decided that we would look at an interim piece, and that could definitely, if council would like some input or to look at that, we can definitely bring that as part of, write in a little bit of that draft design in the land development agreement. So we can do that before adoption of this zoning, or this rezoning.
I believe the answer is we're not quite sure yet what that road design looks like. I mean, it's been proposed previously that it's an access to the oceanfront. Now it looks like the access to the oceanfront is elsewhere. And there's also an opportunity here for consideration of some sort of a park space that Cleveland Avenue, if it doesn't provide that access to the oceanfront, that it be somehow activated differently than a regular road because it's a kind of a dead end there. So what we're aiming to do is to establish a temporary standard, essentially, for that piece of Cleveland so that the interim emergency access is achieved. And then in the land development agreement, we would determine how that split would be between the temporary access or the reduced standard and the making sure that the applicant is responsible for what would be the full cost of the improvements that associated with that property.
Yeah, And I think I'm actually a little bit, taking us a little bit off topic, and I don't want to do that too far. I don't want to hang this up necessarily because of our indecision with Cleveland Avenue. It is a significant decision, and I know during the oceanfront discussions, the developer more or less brought their plan to Westminster Avenue and kind of left it to the district to figure out how to get from Vancouver Street to Westminster Avenue, which is a city block. And this is part of it, and the other one being used now, Galbraith, may be part of it or maybe just temporary. So it really is, I think, I guess I'm more urging staff to think that we should start focusing on this because there's this development, which is relatively modest, but there's another potentially large parcel that might develop very close to that. And so I think this decision is going to come at us pretty quickly. And so we might want to give some thought to it. I'm content with staff's approach to this. I guess our indecision dictates that it will be an interim solution. And I don't, as I say, I don't want to dump that burden on the developer. I don't think that's quite fair in these circumstances. So I'll just leave it at that.
Any other questions for staff at this point? I don't see anyone. Is there anyone who'd like to put forward second reading and schedule a public hearing for June 19th in Council Chambers? Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Kent. Councillor Ray, you moved it. Would you like to speak?
Sure. So I'm proposing this because I think it is something that can go to the public now. We did have a discussion around the frontage and amenity contributions to that, and that, from my recollection, appears to be resolved with this present proposal. The uncertainties around what Cleveland Avenue might look like in the future, as I say, I don't think is a burden to the proponent here. So I'm happy to support second reading at this point.
Anyone else want to speak to this? Councillor Buckley.
I'm not going to support second reading. I think the approach on the community amenity contribution, I don't know, I feel like, we're missing out on an opportunity. We are already setting that expectation with other projects in the community, and I don't think that I think that that's something that we should hold fast to because we are a growing community and there's impacts on the community from development of all kinds. So I won't be supporting second reading.
Anyone else want to speak to this? Councillor
I'm really glad that we had a conversation this afternoon about actually putting a CAC policy in place. Because I do know that applications get caught in between an old policy and council trying to decide on what the new policy will look like. I think that if this was a larger development, I might turn the screws a little bit more. I think that with its size and the improvements along Cleveland, I can support this going to public.
Yeah, for much the same reasons Councillor Elliott articulated, I'm happy to support second reading. Obviously, community amenities are part of the decision-making process. Look forward to the public providing their input. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Councillor Blackman-Wilkes, opposed, motion carries. I bet you Ted's left because we're about to terminate the meeting. So there you go. Councillor Pryor, do you want to move to terminate the meeting?
Nope, not a chance.
Okay, anybody else? Councillor Blackman-Wilkes, second by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed, motion carries.
Yay, it's still light out too.